What if the Boston Celtics already have their next frontline answer hidden in plain sight, not in their own locker room, but across the Atlantic Division, waiting for the right move at the right moment? Whispers are growing louder that Brooklyn Nets center Day'Ron Sharpe could be the piece Brad Stevens is quietly positioning himself to acquire, and the details of his contract might have made that possibility more real than anyone expected. This is not another recycled rumor about the stars every fan already knows. This is about timing, leverage, and opportunity. The 23-year-old Sharpe, standing 6 feet 11 inches and fresh off signing a 2-year, $12.5 million agreement with Brooklyn, did something unusual when he finalized that deal. He waived what is called an implied no-trade clause, a subtle contract mechanism that would have made him harder to move. That small adjustment is now creating an enormous opening. Instead of being locked to the Nets, Sharpe's future can be negotiated, and rival front offices have taken note. For a Celtics team reshaping its interior identity after losing Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and Luke Kornet in a single turbulent summer, the significance of that cannot be overstated. Think about the pattern. Brad Stevens dismantled a championship rotation only 1 year after hanging banner number 18 in June of 2024. Porzingis was shipped to Atlanta, Horford is drifting toward Golden State, and Kornet signed a 3-year, $41 million deal with San Antonio. The names brought in to patch the void, Chris Boucher, Luka Garza, and a promoted Neemias Queta, are intriguing but unproven. None of them has yet shown they can anchor a team with championship expectations once Jason Tatum returns from his Achilles injury. That is why insiders like Jack Simone are urging Boston to think bigger and act sooner, pointing directly to Sharpe as the opportunity hiding in Brooklyn. Sharpe is not a headline superstar, but sometimes it is the overlooked players who shift the balance of power. In 50 games for a Nets team buried at 26 wins and 56 losses, he posted career bests: 7.9 points, 6.6 rebounds, nearly 2 assists, almost a block, and a steal per night, all in just 18 minutes. The efficiency is eye-opening. Project those numbers into a larger role, and suddenly he looks less like a backup and more like an untapped starter. What separates him from many young bigs is his elite offensive rebounding. Boston has historically built contenders on second-chance opportunities, and Sharpe's skill set fits seamlessly into that tradition. Combine that with his affordable contract, essentially double the veteran minimum, but far below the price tags of elite centers, and you have a player who strengthens the roster without strangling future financial flexibility. There is, however, a twist that creates suspense. NBA rules prevent Sharpe from being traded immediately after re-signing. He cannot be moved until the midway point of the 2025 to 2026 season. That timeline forces Boston to make a choice. Do they commit to the trio of Boucher, Queta, and Garza for the first half of the year, effectively treating the season as a bridge until Tatum's return, or do they position themselves aggressively to strike the moment Sharpe becomes trade eligible? The answer will reveal whether Stevens is merely trimming salary to avoid the second apron, or if he is strategically stockpiling flexibility to pounce on opportunities like this one. The curiosity here is not only about Sharpe's numbers, but about what his availability represents. He is young enough to grow alongside Tatum and Brown, cheap enough to keep the Celtics under financial pressure points, and skilled enough to fill the glaring need in the paint. By waiving his no-trade protection, he unknowingly turned himself into one of the most realistic mid-season targets for Boston. Insiders believe the front office already knows this, and fans should be asking not if, but when the call to Brooklyn will come. Boston has often been defined by bold moves made when others least expected them. If Stevens follows that history, the question is simple yet electrifying. Is Day'Ron Sharpe the next quiet addition who could become the foundation of banner number 19? If Boston really is preparing for something bigger than a temporary reset, then the next domino to fall may not be who everyone expects. The conversation has been dominated by names like Anthony Simons, Kristaps Porzingis, and Drew Holiday, but the most fascinating storyline unfolding now is tied to a player who has quietly become both an asset and a potential trade chip. Sam Hauser, the $45 million sharpshooter, is suddenly at the center of speculation, and insiders believe this decision could shape the entire path toward banner number 19. What makes Hauser different is not just his ability to stretch the floor, it is how his contract and skill set collide with the current landscape of the Celtics roster. Signed to a 4-year, $45 million deal in July of 2024, he carries a salary number that is large enough to be useful in trades, yet small enough to appeal to contenders searching for shooting depth. That middle ground is rare in the modern NBA, where stars command supermax contracts and role players are often on short minimum deals. Hauser's situation stands in between, and that is exactly what creates curiosity among rival executives. If Brad Stevens is serious about reshaping Boston's long-term flexibility, then moving Hauser could be the most strategic step available. Consider the timing. The Celtics have already absorbed painful departures. Holiday and Porzingis are gone. Luke Kornet signed with San Antonio for $41 million across 3 years, and Al Horford appears bound for Golden State. Into that vacuum arrived Simons on a contract that expires next summer, Georges Niang, who was quickly flipped, and low-cost signings like Chris Boucher and Luka Garza. The front court looks unsettled, the guard rotation is evolving, but the wing depth is crowded. With Jason Tatum sidelined until at least the 2026 season, the offense will not flow through its usual centerpiece. Instead, Boston needs to experiment, test combinations, and explore which assets carry the most trade value. In that context, Hauser becomes more than just a shooter. He becomes a barometer of whether the Celtics are content with small adjustments or willing to embrace bold maneuvering. The risk is also part of the intrigue. Hauser is expected to play a larger role than ever before. If he thrives, his contract looks like a bargain. If he struggles, the same deal could quickly be seen as deadweight. That duality is what creates urgency. Teams across the league know the volatility of shooting specialists, and contenders desperate for spacing may be tempted to pay a premium before performance variance erodes his reputation. For Boston, the decision is whether to gamble on his breakout or to convert his current value into pieces that better align with the 2026 and 2027 window, when Tatum is back and the franchise expects to truly contend again. Insiders point out that Hauser's market is quietly robust. The Los Angeles Lakers have been mentioned as a potential destination, not only because of their need for reliable shooting, but because his contract number can be matched without gutting their core. Other teams lurking just below the championship tier may also see him as the missing piece, a low-ego floor spacer who can tilt defenses and open lanes for stars. If multiple bidders emerge, Boston could extract draft capital or even a rotation player who fits their timeline. For fans, the idea of moving a shooter of Hauser's caliber may feel like subtraction, but history suggests otherwise. Stevens has consistently turned role players into larger strategic advantages, creating room for stars and rebalancing the payroll. Trading Hauser does not signal surrender, it signals foresight. The Celtics are already threading a tight needle between competitiveness and financial restraint under the new collective bargaining agreement. Selling high on Hauser could be the kind of forward-thinking move that positions Boston for both immediate balance and long-term power. The curiosity gap lies in what Boston values most. Do they want the certainty of elite three-point shooting during a transitional season, or do they want the flexibility to craft a roster that peaks when Tatum is fully healthy again? Hauser's wave shots may define games in the short term, but his contract may define the franchise's options in the long term. Fans are left wondering which path Stevens will choose, and that tension is precisely what makes this storyline so electrifying. If the call comes and Hauser is moved, it will not be because Boston doubts his talent. It will be because they believe banner number 19 requires more than shooting. It requires timing, patience, and the courage to act before the rest of the league realizes the opportunity has already slipped away. The conversation around Boston is no longer about whether the Celtics will make moves. It is about how bold those moves will be and how far the front office is willing to go to reshape the financial and competitive future of the franchise. For months, the narrative has been dominated by talk of the second apron, luxury tax penalties, and the impossibility of keeping last season's roster intact. Yet beneath those layers of accounting jargon, there is a more dramatic storyline emerging, one that could change not only the roster but also the way the team positions itself for the return of its superstar in the year 2026. The Boston Celtics entered this season with a tax bill that, in practical numbers, exceeds $12 million. To the average fan, that figure might sound like an abstract concept, a drop in the bucket for billionaires. But in the boardrooms of ownership groups and league offices, every single dollar above the threshold reshapes what a team can or cannot do. The fact that the Celtics acted so aggressively during the summer, moving out contracts like Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday while letting veterans like Al Horford walk, shows that this is not just about trimming around the edges. It is a full-scale reset disguised as tactical maneuvering. The acquisition of Anthony Simons with his expiring contract worth $27 million is perhaps the most telling sign. From the very moment his name was attached to Boston, insiders knew this was not about basketball fit, but rather about flexibility. Shedding that amount before the deadline would allow the Celtics to slip below the punitive tax line and enter next offseason with a blank canvas. It is in that context that the name of Sam Hauser begins to surface, and this is where the intrigue truly deepens. Hauser is not the kind of player who dominates highlight reels, yet his value extends far beyond the casual box score. At 27 years old, on a contract that averages around $45 million across multiple years, he represents one of the most fascinating trade chips in the league. His shooting ability is rare enough to be coveted by contenders desperate for floor spacing, and his deal is structured in a way that makes him both affordable now and valuable later. The Celtics know this, and rival general managers know it too. Which leads to the obvious but still unsettling question. Would Boston be willing to part with one of its most reliable shooters, not because of performance, but because of dollars and cents? For many fans, the idea feels jarring. Why trade away a player who could step into a bigger role while Tatum recovers? Why thin the roster when the future seems to hinge on depth and preparation for another title run? The answer lies in the delicate balance of risk. If Hauser stays and struggles under a heavier workload, his contract could quickly shift from a bargain to a burden. If he is moved now, Boston could command a strong return while also clearing a pathway toward financial breathing room. The paradox is cruel but inescapable. There's also the broader chessboard to consider. The summer of 2026 is expected to be one of the wildest free agency periods in modern NBA history. Entering that landscape with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and rookie Hugo Gonzalez as the only pieces under guaranteed contracts could give the Celtics a level of flexibility unmatched by most franchises. That scenario only becomes realistic if Boston continues to carve away at the payroll, and Hauser's departure could be the move that pushes the reset button fully. In the end, this is not about whether the Celtics are contenders this year. The front office has already signaled that the true window opens again when Tatum returns healthy. This is about creating the cleanest possible stage for that moment. Trading Sam Hauser would be a shock to many, yet it might also be the very step that ensures Boston is not just competitive, but dominant when the core reunites. The story is not about saving $12 million. It is about shaping the destiny of a franchise that knows its greatest opportunity is just around the corner.